You know that feeling when you've just finished reading something important, maybe for your job, maybe something you're really trying to understand, and you're just, well, not entirely sure what stuck.
Oh, definitely. We all want to learn smarter, not just harder, right?
Exactly. And that's precisely what we're going to deep dive into today.
That's right. We're going to explore how you can move beyond simply letting words wash over you to actively engaging with text in a way that significantly boosts your understanding and memory.
Like a real upgrade for how your brain processes information when you read.
Precisely.
And the insights for this upgrade, they come from a really robust piece of research, a meta-analytic review called Text Generation Benefits Learning, published in the Educational Psychology Review.
Ah, yes, a meta-analysis. Good stuff.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't encountered one before, it's basically a study that looks at a whole bunch of other studies on the same topic. It pulls all the data together.
So you get a really strong overview of what the evidence shows overall.
Exactly. This particular review looked at a wide range of research to answer a core question that's probably on, well, on your mind. Can actively generating text while you're learning from it make a real difference compared to just reading?
And if so, how? What are the specific ways you can actually do this to see those benefits?
Right. That's our mission today, to really dig into when and how this generation effect, as it's known, can be a game changer for your learning.
And we're not just talking general ideas here. We want to focus on concrete techniques and situations, things that can make a tangible difference for you.
Okay, let's unpack this. The headline finding, right off the bat, is that this meta-analysis found a clear, positive impact when you actively generate text while learning.
Uh-huh. So it works.
It works.
Yeah.
Across all the studies they analyzed, people who actively created text, even just parts of it, learned more effectively from what they were reading compared to those who were just, reading passively.
And they quantified that, didn't they?
They did. The average effect size they found was a Hedges G of 0.41.
Okay, so 0.41. What does that mean in practical terms?
Well, in plain English, that's considered a medium-sized positive effect, which is actually quite significant when we're talking about learning strategies.
Medium is pretty good in this field, yeah. And what's really interesting for you is that this benefit wasn't just because people spent more time on the task, right?
Exactly. That's crucial. The researchers specifically accounted for the time spent learning, and the positive effect of generation still held strong.
So it's not just time on task. There's something about the act of generating itself.
Yes, something about that process makes a difference in how your brain processes and retains the information.
And this wasn't limited to just one type of reading material you might encounter.
No, that's another key point. They saw this effect across both narrative texts like stories, accounts, and expository texts.
The more informational stuff like reports or textbooks.
Right, the stuff you read to learn facts and concepts. Plus, it didn't seem to matter too much what kind of test they used afterwards to check learning.
That's really important. The fact that this benefit shows up across different materials, different tests, it suggests it's a pretty fundamental principle at play.
It really does. And this idea, making learning a bit more active, it reminds me of something we've touched on before, desirable difficulties.
Ah, yes. Good connection.
How does this generation effect fit in there?
Well, the generation effect is a perfect example of these desirable difficulties. The core idea, which folks like Robert Bjork have really championed, is that you often learn more deeply and remember longer when you encounter certain challenges during the learning.
Challenges, but desirable ones, not just frustrating ones.
Exactly. They're not meant to be roadblocks, but tasks that push your brain to engage more deeply. Think about it. If you just breeze through something without really engaging.
Your brain doesn't have to work very hard.
Right. It doesn't encode the information as strongly.
It's like building mental muscle. You need some resistance to get stronger. So what are some other examples of these desirable difficulties?
Well, for your own learning, we're talking about things like spreading out your study sessions instead of cramming. That's distributed practice.
Uh-huh. I know I should do that more.
We all should. Or interleaving. If you're learning multiple things, mix them up instead of focusing on just one until you think you've mastered it.
Okay.
Even just testing yourself, quizzing yourself on the material is a really powerful, desirable difficulty.
Right.
These methods might feel a bit slower, maybe harder at first, but they lead to much better long-term understanding and retention for you.
And now we can add actively generating text to that toolkit.
Definitely. It fits right in.
Okay, so text generation, it sounds simple, but the study gets pretty specific about what that actually means in this context. It's not just summarizing after you're done reading, is it?
No, that's a critical distinction for you to understand. The researchers defined text generation here as activities where you're actively creating the text material itself, or at least significant parts of it, while you are learning.
While you learn. Okay,
Mhm.
so instead of just reading a complete finished text,
Exactly. It's happening sort of in place of just reading.
can you give us some concrete examples? What do these tasks look like in the study so people can picture how they might apply this?
Sure. Some common techniques included letter completion in fragmented text.
Fragmented text.
Yeah. So instead of seeing a complete sentence like, some letters are missing, you might see small letters are miss, and your task is to fill in those blanks.
Ah, okay. I see. You're actively reconstructing the words.
Precisely. Another method was reordering scrambled sentences. Imagine a paragraph where all the sentences are jumbled up.
And you have to put it back in the right order.
Exactly. You have to figure out the logical flow.
Okay, so in both cases, you're actively rebuilding the text in some way, not just passively absorbing it.
That's the key. And the learning outcomes after you did these kinds of activities were then compared to how well people learned when they simply read the fully formed text. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because as the meta-analysis points out, earlier research on this kind of thing, especially with more complex materials like full articles you might read,
Yeah.
had actually shown some pretty inconsistent results. Sometimes it seemed to help, sometimes not so much.
So it wasn't always clear if it worked.
Right, which is why this meta-analysis is so valuable. It really tried to figure out why those inconsistencies existed, what makes it work sometimes and not others.
And the answer seems to be, it depends. It's not one size fits all.
Precisely. The benefit of text generation really depends on the context, on what you're learning and how you're generating.
Okay.
The authors bring in this idea called the Material Appropriate Processing Framework, MAP for short.
MAP, Material Appropriate Processing. What's that about?
Basically, it suggests that your learning is most effective when the kind of thinking you do for the learning task, like text generation, really aligns with or complements the thinking that the material itself naturally encourages.
Okay, so matching the task to the text type. That makes sense.
Yeah, finding the right kind of active engagement for the specific kind of material you're trying to learn from.
So what are these different types of processing we need to think about?
The MAP framework mainly talks about two types relevant here. First, there's processing individual items. Think of these as the specific details, facts, concepts, or idea units within the text.
Focusing on the bits and pieces.
Exactly. Second, there's relational processing. This is all about organizing those individual items, building connections between them, seeing the bigger picture, how it all fits together.
Okay, individual details versus the connections between them. Got it. Now, how do these processing types interact with different kinds of texts and those different generation tasks, like the letter completion or sentence scrambling?
Right. This is where the really cool insights emerge from the meta-analysis. Let's start with narrative text stories.
Okay.
These usually have a structure you're familiar with, right? Characters, plot, climax, resolution. Because of that structure, your brain is often already kind of primed to do that relational processing.
You're naturally looking for how things connect in a story.
Exactly. You're tracking the plot, the character arcs.
So if narratives already encourage connecting the dots, what kind of generation task would help most there?
Well, according to MAP theory, you'd want a task that boosts the other kind of processing, the individual item processing.
Focusing on the details within the story.
Precisely. And this is where letter completion comes in. By making you focus on individual words, completing them, it really directs your attention to those specific details, the exact wording.
Okay. And did the meta-analysis find that?
They observed a trend supporting it. While it wasn't statistically significant in their analysis, the effect for letter completion looked stronger with narratives. It points in that direction.
Interesting. So for stories, maybe focusing on the words themselves helps solidify the details, since the story structure is already handling the connections.
That seems to be the idea. Now, what about expository texts, the informational stuff?
Like reports, articles, textbooks.
Yeah. These often focus on presenting new concepts, facts, explanations. They have individual pieces of information for sure, but they don't always have that built-in story structure that naturally guides relational processing for everyone.
So you might focus on understanding each concept, but not automatically see how they all link together.
Exactly. You might get the definitions, but miss the overarching argument or structure without extra effort.
Okay, so for these texts, You need a generation task that encourages that relational processing, right?
Yeah.
To help you build the connections.
Bingo. And this is where sentence unscrambling really shines. To put jumbled sentences in the correct order, you have to think about the relationships between the
You're
ideas.
forced to see how they connect logically.
Yes, you're organizing and integrating the information. And the meta-analysis found a significant benefit of sentence unscrambling over letter completion, specifically when people were learning from expository texts.
Wow, okay. That's a really clear, practical finding.
It really is. It suggests a powerful way to approach learning from informational material.
So that's a fantastic takeaway. If you're reading, say, a novel or a story-like case study, maybe playing with letter completion could sharpen your focus on the details.
Uh-huh.
But if you're tackling a dense research paper or a complex report for work, trying to reconstruct the flow by unscrambling key sentences could be much more effective for building real understanding.
That's precisely the practical implication. Tailor your active learning technique. It's not just about being active, it's about being active in the right way for the material.
Great stuff. Now, beyond this interaction between text type and task type, the meta-analysis also looked at other factors that might influence how well this generation effect works,
Right, there were several other moderators they explored.
like how learning was assessed. Did that matter?
It did. This was another really interesting finding. Free recall, just asking people to write down everything they could remember, no prompts showed the largest benefit from generation.
The biggest boost was seen when people had to just remember on their own.
Yeah. Whereas cued recall, where you get some hints or multiple choice questions, they showed smaller or even no noticeable benefits from the generation task.
Hmm. Why would that be? Why free recall?
Well, the thinking is that when you actively generate text during learning, you're kind of building stronger internal pathways, stronger retrieval cues for accessing that information later.
Like creating your own mental map to the knowledge.
Exactly. Free recall forces you to rely entirely on that internal map you built. When you get hints or multiple choice options, the test itself provides some of that structure.
Reducing the advantage you got from building it yourself during generation.
Potentially, yes, it might level the playing field a bit.
That makes intuitive sense, like navigating somewhere using your own memory versus turn-by-turn directions. Okay, what about your mindset as a learner? Did it matter if you knew you were going to be tested? Intentional versus incidental learning.
The meta-regression analysis suggested that intentional learning, knowing you'll be tested, seemed to benefit more from generation.
So knowing a test is coming makes generation even more helpful.
It seems that way. Maybe you just engage more deeply with the generation task if you know you'll need the information later, you take it more seriously.
Okay, good to keep in mind. If you know you really need to remember something, double down on generation. What about the length of the text itself?
Ah, yes. Text length. It looks like there might be a sweet spot.
Oh,
The analysis showed the largest generation effect for texts that were in the medium range, roughly 300 to 600 words.
and what about really long texts?
Very long texts, those over about 900 words, showed little to no benefit from generation in this analysis.
Really? Why would that be? Cognitive overload.
That's the likely culprit. Engaging in these generation tasks, especially with very long, complex material, could just put too much strain on your working memory.
It becomes too demanding, maybe cancels out the benefit.
Possibly. It suggests that for those really long readings you have to do, breaking them down might be key.
Right, tackle them in smaller chunks and apply generation techniques to each chunk individually.
That seems like a sensible approach based on this.
Good practical tip. What about time pressure? Did having limited time to learn affect the generation benefit?
Interestingly, no. The meta-analysis didn't find a significant effect of learning time constraints.
So the benefit isn't just because generation forces you to spend more time.
Correct. Even when you account for the time spent learning, the generation effect still holds up. It's about the quality of the processing, not just the quantity of time.
Okay. And what about the long term? Does this help you remember things just for a test tomorrow, or does it stick?
The findings here are encouraging. The benefit remained across different retention intervals, different lengths of time between learning and testing.
So it suggests a benefit for long-term retention.
Yes. It implies that generation helps things stick with you longer, which is crucial, right? For education, for work, for any learning you want to actually use later.
Absolutely. Not just a short-term memory trick. Okay, they also looked at characteristics of the participants, right? Like students versus others.
They did. Some analyses suggested slightly larger effects in student samples, but it wasn't entirely consistent across the board. So maybe a slight edge for students, but more research might be needed there.
And anything else about the studies themselves, like how they were designed?
Yeah, they looked at things like within subject designs versus between subjects.
Where the same people do both conditions versus different groups?
Right. And some analyses showed larger effects in those within subject designs, where the same people experience both generation and passive reading. Could be various methodological reasons for that.
Okay. And they noted older studies showed bigger effects.
They did, which is common in meta-analyses. They looked into potential reasons like publication bias, but the analysis for that was a bit inconclusive.
Right. Standard checks in a meta-analysis.
Mm.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, lots of nuances. Let's try and bring it all back together. What are the main actionable steps people can take away from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is pretty clear. Actively generating text while you learn can be a really powerful tool, much better than just passively reading.
It enhances understanding, helps you remember longer. It's about engaging more actively.
Exactly. Move beyond being just a receiver of information. Become more of a constructor.
And you can be strategic about how you do that active construction.
Absolutely. Tailor the technique. When you're reading narratives, stories, maybe lean towards tasks like letter completion things that make you focus on the specific words and detail.
Because the story structure is already helping with connections.
Right. But when you're tackling that denser, informational, expository text,
The reports, the articles.
yeah, then try techniques like sentence unscrambling or maybe creating outlines or concept maps as you go, things that force you to organize and connect the ideas.
Focus on building that relational understanding.
Precisely.
And keep text length in mind for those really long documents.
Break them down. Don't try to apply generation to a massive text all at once. Work through it section by section.
Makes sense. Manage the cognitive load.
And remember, the benefits seem to be durable. This helps with long-term retention, so it's a worthwhile investment of effort.
So as you face your next reading task, whatever it is, think about this. How can you actively build the information as you encounter it, not just consume it?
Yeah. Could that shift from passive consumption to active construction be a key to unlocking deeper understanding? Especially now with so much information coming at us.
It's definitely something to consider, to experiment with in your own learning. Find what works for you and the types of things you need to learn.
And we'd encourage you, if you're interested, to look more into the generation effect and desirable difficulties. There's a lot more research out there.
Tailor it to your own needs. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Yeah, hopefully this gives you some practical ideas.
We hope you found some valuable nuggets you can try out right away in your own learning habits.